Evening from David Fordham at Lang Park for tonight's big rugby league test match, the first test for 1982 between Australia and the touring New Zealand Kiwis. Well, tonight's match is the 51st test match between the two countries. Since 1935, Australia have won 33, New Zealand have won 17, and the last win by New Zealand was in Auckland in 1971 when they won by 24 points to 3. When the sides met here in 1978, the Australian side ran out winners by 38 points to 7, which in fact was a winning record margin by the Australian side over New Zealand. But for his pre-match thoughts on the game, my co-commentator is the former international forward, Mick Vievers.
Good evening. How are you, David?
I'm well, Mick, and how do you think tonight's game will go?
Well, actually, after watching New Zealand and Queensland last week, I was quite disappointed. I feel that they will improve in their, what shall we say, their general match play because of the inclusion of those Sydney players, but I really feel they'll be pushing it. They're playing the best team in the world, actually, and when you look at that Australian side, there's not too many weaknesses in it, if at all there is a weakness. And for New Zealand, I saw a lot of weaknesses last week. Whether they've shored up those weaknesses, I don't know. And I don't think they could have, quite frankly, mate.
Well, Mick, let's look at the introduction of 4 of the Sydney players into the side. We've got Graham and Broadhurst, which obviously will strengthen the pack, and Arcoy and Filipina in the centres.
Well, they will. You must remember that in the back line there, Filipina and Arcoy have been playing, well, just mediocre football in Sydney. Of course, they won't have to do much to improve on what we saw at Lang Park last week, so that probably will be an improvement. In the forwards, yes, I do agree that Broadhurst and company, and particularly the captain, Mark Graham, will add a bit of punch to that New Zealand pack, which is desperately needed. I really felt that Kevin Tamati was the only guy who was performing last week against Queensland, whereas these two will go along and push it along a bit. For Australia, there is no weaknesses. I can't see any. I know there's been a lot spoken about Cronin and Rogers and whether probably our big Mal Meninga should be playing. I feel you don't split a winning combination. Those two guys have proved themselves over the years, and they really haven't had bad games, and I think that they'll produce the goods tonight.
So you're tipping an Australian win?
And a big win for Australia.
Okay, sure. I can only lean the same way on the form New Zealand displayed against Queensland here at Lang Park last week. But now let's look at the two teams as they take the field tonight.
And Max Krilich leads the Australian team out onto the ground. Their team is and the Australian team first out onto Lang Park tonight, led out by Max Krilich, who tonight makes his debut as Australia's captain, although playing in his 4th test match. Their team is Greg Bretnell, John Rebo, Mick Cronin, Steve Rogers, Kerry Bosted, Wally Lewis, Steve Mortimer, Paul Vorton, Les Boyd, Rowan Hancock, Rod Morris, Max Krilich and Craig Young. Well, the New Zealand side led out. Here's their team: Kemble, Prome, Filipina, Luluai, O'Hara, Arcoy, Smith, Graham, Gall, West, Tamati, Broadhurst, and their coach, Seth Mountford. The referee for tonight's game is the 43-year-old Printers representative from Wakefield in Yorkshire, tonight officiating in his 19th test, Fred Lindop. And now the big prop forward, Kevin Tamati, will lead the New Zealand test side in the haka, the Maori war cry. And note the crowd love that. The Australians going through their warm-up exercises. This first test match is just about to begin. And so the veteran centre, Mick Cronin, gets the ball underway for Australia, and New Zealand receive the ball from the kick-off, and immediately some very solid defence by the Australians through Rowan Hancock and Les Boyd that concedes the first penalty of the match going to New Zealand.
Looking at Boyd there, if I remember rightly, he got his marching orders in the same test
what, 1978, wasn't
No,
it?
it was in 1980 at Carlaw Park, Mick, when they met on the last occasion.
I remember it was in a test against New Zealand, and he got his marching orders, and there's another mistake by New Zealand, not putting the ball out.
So Brentnell takes the ball up for Australia. That's Bowstead. Beach one tackle, but finally wrapped up by the hooker Tamati. Mark Broadhurst also in there, the number 13 for New Zealand. And this time, Fred Lindop obviously exercising his authority in the opening minutes, catching New Zealand inside the 5, and the penalty goes to Australia. So Greg Brentnell, the Canterbury fullback tonight, playing in his 4th test match for Australia, made his debut as a centre against New Zealand in 1980. His kick taking play over the halfway line, and that's where Australia will receive the ball again with the restart through the captain, Krilic. Oh, and a solid tackle. Hancock has been felled by the big prop forward, Tamati. Remembering that Rowan Hancock has had cheekbone injury in the past 2 games. We'll be interested to know whether he comes up after that very, very solid challenge.
That was just a body charge by both of them. By Jove, wasn't it a crunch of men? Both of them going there. Well, here it is in replay, and the ball flies. And actually, it wasn't only that Hancock hit the man, he hit the ground. Watch him hit the ground. Whap.
Well, that's the first time that Rowan Hancock had touched the ball in a test match. And I was going to say, I think he'll remember it well, but I just wonder whether he will or not, Mick, because he hasn't moved.
No, he's on his knees, but he's certainly winded. And of course, he wouldn't be warmed up, so the blood wouldn't have been flowing. And there's a bit of nonsense with Wally Lewis here. It isn't.
It's Paul Vaughton.
It's young Paul Vaughton, the carrot head.
So the penalty, it appears, will go Australia's way. And this man being called out is the prop forward Tamati. He's an amateur boxer in New Zealand. The big Wellington prop forward, a veteran of 11 test matches for New Zealand. And Rowan Hancock is still groggy back in New Zealand's end of the ground. So we've had just over 2.5 minutes of play in this first test match, and the crowd certainly have had their money's worth already. So again, Australia down in New Zealand's end of the ground as Rod Morris takes the ball up for Australia. Max Krilic, the man in a dummy half. It goes out through Young. Switch of play, Boyd right around the top, and it's on. Craig Young coming in to try and sort out Bruce Gall. Well, Fred Lindop certainly has his hands full out there tonight, because the opening minutes, quite predictably, they Mick have erupted.
Well, actually, New Zealand have to prove something, and I think by the look of it, Seth Mountain sent them out and said, put the man on the ground, and here it is, a bit of nonsense. Actually, it happened a little before that, but here's Craig Young coming in. You know, a little bit of hold me back and let me at him there, but it could develop, so Mr. Lindop will have to keep his finger on the pulse well and truly.
So Brentnell again looking for touch. Finds it inside the New Zealand quarter. So now New Zealand will be forced to defend with the restart of play through the captain, Krilic. Mortimer again. And again some good defence by no. He's supposed to tackle Boyd. Now Cronin turned it back inside to Lewis. And Lewis goes to ground through the tackle of Mark Graham. Krilic a dummy half on the blind side. Craig Young. And he's taken 10 metres short of the New Zealand line. Mortimer through the dummy. Brentnell left it behind him. And regained by New Zealand through the prop forward Tamati. Broadhurst. West. Again, some good defence by Australia.
I'll be watching West with interest tonight, David, because the last games we've seen, the last one he played against Queensland, he was very timid with his running. Let's hope he's livened up tonight.
So Rowan Hancock is back on the field for Australia. In fact, he didn't leave the field, and he appears to be moving quite freely out there now, but certainly took a jarring tackle in the opening minutes of the game.
And that penalty for Paul Vaughton going in with a little bit of a chip into the chin.
Well, obviously the nerves of Paul Vaughton making his test debut tonight. So too is Rowan Hancock, as I mentioned. And also the second row forward, Bruce Gall from Taranaki in New Zealand.
And the game, barely 5 minutes old, and we've had 6 penalties already, three apiece to each side.
So New Zealand in possession, 8 metres short of the halfway line. Knock on that time by the hooker Tamati. And the referee Lindop right on the spot there to detect it, and a scrum will go down. And it will be fed by Gordon Smith of the West Coast in New Zealand. Tonight playing in his 10th test match for New Zealand. And the penalty against the way the Australian front row is lining up. And the loose arm signalled by referee Fred Lindop, who's certainly made his presence felt already up there tonight, Mick.
Yes, well, he never ever did take any nonsense, and I don't think he's about to start now.
Tamati takes play over halfway, loses it. Picked up by Howard Tamati. That's Broadhurst. Comes to his Manly teammate Paul Vaughton and goes to ground. Graham. But Australia caught inside the 5 again. Well, it's all very well to a referee to put his mark on the game, but surely he can let the game flow. I think the crowd here tonight, Mick, have come to watch a game of football and not watch Mr. Lindop perform.
Yes, I agree with that last penalty. I don't think they were offside.
So New Zealand with the ball again. West taking it up to the quarter line. And we welcome all our country relay stations throughout Queensland to our telecast tonight. That's Tamati, particularly our friends in Maryborough, Rockhampton, Mackay, Townsville, Mount Isa and Toowoomba. Graham switching play. That's West. Stood in the tackle. Finally Vaughton went over the top, and underneath was the prop forward Rod Morris. Tamati again. Smith. It goes out to Arcoy. Filipana caught well in the tackle. Kemble. Wrapped up by Steve Rogers. Well, that's the first time we've seen the New Zealand backline in action. Prom. The last time he appeared in a test match here at Lang Park was as a second row forward, and that was back in 1978. Arcoy switching play again to Filipina. There's the strength of Olsen Filipina, just bumping off the second row forward row and Hancock. Well, he was the player of the series in 1978 and obviously trying to pick up where he left off, Mick.
Not doing a bad job of it. So far New Zealand, of course, have had the ball and making a much better fist of it than the Australian side, who I feel after that early rush by New Zealand haven't really settled down, and New Zealand not allowing them to settle down.
So a scrum win to New Zealand. Smith, Graham, broke the first line. Finally claimed in the tackle. Again the cover defence was there of Paul Vaughton. Tamati, a dummy half. On the blind side to his cousin, Kevin Tamati. Kevin, of course, from Wellington, and Howie Tamati from Taranaki. And so too is the number 9, the man in possession, Bruce Gall from Taranaki in New Zealand. So they'll play the ball for New Zealand, and again Australia caught offside. That time, quite justifiably, the men offside were Rebo and Steve Rogers, and a chance for first blood to be drawn by New Zealand. We've had just on 8.5 minutes of play in this first half, and across comes the halfback Gordon Smith, who will look for the opening points in this first test match.
No doubt about it. Mark Broadhurst and of course the captain Mark Graham and Fred Arcoy, probably not so much he, but Olsen Filipino. They've already made their mark on this game. They've lifted the New Zealanders, and it seems to me this is all that they needed last week, David, from watching this game so far. They just needed a few, what shall we say, professionals in the middle to liven them up somewhat.
So Smith with the ball placed. A chance to put New Zealand in the lead. With just on 9 minutes of play gone, there's the kick. There's the confidence booster for New Zealand. They lead the first test match by 2 points to 0. We'll be back at Lang Park in just a moment. Well, Mick, that's certainly the confidence booster they needed so early in this first half.
Well, actually, they've had territorially the better of Australia right from first knock, and Australia haven't got over seeing Hancock go down, and New Zealand have thrown the ball about and looked a different side.
Graham. Broadhurst, claimed by Wally Lewis and Rod Morris, the 2 Queenslanders. Play about 9 metres out from the New Zealand 22. West. He's running with more determination, but this time driven back. Got the one-handed pass away to Tamati, to Broadhurst, to Graham, to Smith, and the ball's been dropped by the 5'8" Arcoy, picked up by Les Boyd. And again, some scrappy play by the Australians. And it appears that New Zealand have regained the ball with 6 more tackles to go.
Seems to be the trend of the Australians. Panicky passing. They haven't settled down as yet. It's the first time, really, they've had the ball, and they threw it away to the New Zealanders again.
Well, New Zealand's last win here at Lang Park was back in 1963, when before a crowd of over 30,000, they defeated Australia by 16 points to 13. But Australia have won the last 7 test matches between these two countries, with New Zealand's last win, as we mentioned earlier, back in 1971 in Auckland. They've certainly gone into tonight's game as underdogs after their very disappointing performance against Queensland, but they've obviously been strengthened by the inclusion of the 4 men from the Sydney First Grade Premiership, and that was one of them, Mark Graham, and there's one of the others, Fred Arcoy. So Arcoy to his feet just outside the quarter. Krilich and Vorton combining, and that's tackle number 6 on New Zealand. So the scrum will take place midway between the half and the quarter line at New Zealand's end of the ground. They lead by 2 points to 0. And we see that Luluai and Filipina are up very, very flat in defence. But the penalty has gone for the incorrect feed by the halfback Gordon Smith. And again, the penalty to Australia. So Greg Brentnell with the left foot drives play inside the New Zealand quarter. Kerry Bowstead throws the ball to the captain, Max Krilich, and Rod Morris is the first man up off the ruck. There's the dummy by Australia. Cut out Hancock as well. Vorton on the boil.
They certainly didn't fall for that dummy, did they?
No, it was well read by the New Zealand defence. Now Cronin. He's burst the tackle. Rogers left it behind him, and it's picked up by the Auckland centre, James Luluai. So Prom takes the ball up for New Zealand. Luluai, claimed by Krilich, and also by prop forward Morris. Gall, upended by Vorton and Morris. Tamati to the other Tamati of the team, that's Kevin. He's wearing 11, and Howard Tamati in 12. He's slotting now into dummy half. Dummy to Broadhurst. That's Graham. Very nearly split the tackle of Vorton, but fortunately the cover was there through Steve Mortimer. And I'll tell you what, Mark Graham has looked very, very impressive, Mick. He's certainly made a big difference to this New Zealand side.
Oh, yes, he's just running onto the ball there shows the difference, and it seems to be a disease that's catching with the New Zealanders. They're starting to run onto it, and they look most impressive so far into this match. I must admit, I felt, before you go, David, I felt a little for Steve Rogers there. He knows there's pressure on him because a big fella called Mal Meninga's waiting in the breaches, and I think that's why the ball was dropped on that occasion.
And the crowd here at Lang Park certainly let him know it as well. So Greg Brentnell to kick for touch. What I was about to say was Mark Graham tonight is leading New Zealand for the 8th time, and a lot of people in Brisbane will remember him because he played a big hand in North's Premiership here in Brisbane in 1980. So Greg Brentnell drives play up to within about 10 metres of the New Zealand line. Rod Morris, tackled by the big second row forward Graham West. Craig Young, close to the line. Mortimer, the little general, calling play from dummy half. New Zealand very slow to get off Craig Young. Well, it appears that 6 more tackles to go. The man that lunged forward was West. Boyd, close to the line and driven back. Plays it to Krilich. Vorton, playing in his first test match tonight for Australia. Called into the team as a late replacement for the injured Ray Price. And again, this time the penalty. You can't blame New Zealand for that, trying to kill the play with Australia on the attack. And now will Mick Cronin draw points level for Australia.
Well, actually, I think Australia could have had a few more points on the board if they'd thrown the ball wide. Then they had a nice wide open side field to use. They had the backs lined deep, and the forwards were content to take it one out on the tight blind side. I think that'd have been a better to throw it to the back line, and let's see the Australian back line function, because it is the best in the world, we're told.
Well, Mick Cronin kicked 7 goals from 12 attempts in the last international here against New Zealand at Lang Park, when Australia won that night by a record-winning margin by 38 points to 7. But on that night, Magic Mick missed some from some very easy positions here at Lang Park. Let's see what he can do. Can he draw the scores level? No trouble whatsoever. 1 flag up, 1 flag down, and the referee has overruled it. Well, it certainly looked okay from here, although the wind did catch it at the last minute. One flag up, one flag down, and Australia still trail New Zealand by 2-0.
I agree that it wasn't over the post, David. From here, quite appear with the referee and his handkerchief as he pulled it out and fluttered it around a little.
So Australia now in possession, just inside New Zealand's end of the ground. Vaughton, well tackled by the second row forward, Bruce Gall. Krilich again to slot into dummy half for Australia. They work towards this side again, but the penalty, New Zealand inside the 5 again.
Les Boyd saying something to Mark Broadhurst coming up quickly, and as Broadhurst went back and offside, Boyd didn't miss him, clubmate from Manly, but he said a few, well chosen words, I would imagine.
Well, they'll be teammates tomorrow, of course, in Sydney with a big clash against Parramatta. And of course the trump card on the Parramatta side is the man lining the ball up for his second kick and goal in the space of a minute, the prolific point scorer Mick Cronin, who has virtually chalked up 30 appearances in the green and gold that include World Cup matches. What a great player he's been for Australia. So the two cousins there, the Tamati cousins. On the right is Kevin Tamati, and the hooker wearing number 12 is Howie Tamati of Taranaki. 20 test matches, or 22 test matches between them with their appearance here tonight. Mick Cronin with the ball placed. Moves in. That time the touch judges agree. The scores come back level after 17 and a half minutes of play in this first half. We'll be back at Lang Park in just a moment. So the restart of play by Olsen Filipina of Balmain Club in Sydney, formerly of Auckland. And Brentnell, the Canterbury fullback, brings play up for the Australian side to 10 metres outside the quarter.
By Jove, the New Zealand defence straight on or head on has really improved. They're going up and they're taking the man out of the play very quickly indeed.
Well, one of the rare sights you see. Mick Cronin immediately put to ground by Fred Arcoy. But Arcoy is writhing in a bit of pain back towards the Australian quarter line. There's not many people put Cronin on the ground straight away, although it's happened more in season 1982 than it has in the past. Les Boyd wriggled out of one tackle, well taken by Vaughton, but he couldn't beat the tackle of Tamati. Krilich runs from dummy half. Craig Young, beautiful pass to Lewis. Lewis in the clear. Finally taken midway between the half and the quarter line at New Zealand's end of the ground. Australia on the attack through Mortimer. Now Cronin, and he lacks support out wide. Finally tackled by Graham West, and that's on tackle number 6.
Australia throwing the ball to the men that count, out to the back line, and immediately they start to make inroads into the New Zealand defence, and I felt they should have been doing this much earlier, as I said.
So the scrum feed by Gordon Smith, but before the scrum can pack, the penalty for the feed up by Max Krilich. Well, he didn't agree with it, but he won't change the decision of the English referee Fred Lindop. So the burly figure of Olsen Filipina, standing at only 5'10", but tipping the scales at 15 stone, and tonight playing in his 9th test match in the black and white of New Zealand. Beautiful pass for Graham, but he was well wrapped up by the Australian defence, Lewis and Vaughton. Broadhurst, that's a great run by the big New Zealand prop, but Luluai knocks it on. It's picked up by O'Hara on the left wing, but the referee's whistle had already gone, and play will come back once again for the scrum on the Australian quarter line.
That was very good, and Broadhurst pushing off and then unloading looked very good. Unfortunately, the pass, or unfortunately, the pass going to ground. Penalties are 7-all at present, and basically we've only had one scrum that eventuated. It has been penalties from the rest.
So Steve Mortimer feeds the scrum for Australia, and the penalty for the incorrect feed. And the tap quickly taken by New Zealand, Graham, and Australia well offside and penalised by the referee.
And very good thinking by the little half there.
Well, it gives them a chance, Mick, to put 2 more points on the board.
My word, because Australia no chance to get onside. They were all standing there. And Gordon Smith, a quick tap, caught them all napping, and now given his kicker a chance to put those added 2 points, which they need badly.
Well, as Gordon Smith lines the kick up. He's second in this match. Just a reminder to our tennis fans that the Australia-Chile quarterfinals in the Davis Cup can be seen live and exclusive on the 7 Network, July 9, 10 and 11. So Smith put New Zealand in the lead with his first successful attempt. Can he make it 2 from 2? He moves in. Watch for the touch judges. Up go the flags. New Zealand back in the lead by 4 points to 2. And 21 minutes of play gone in this first half. Well, 2 vital goals, Mick.
And New Zealand looking very dangerous. And basically it's because they've tightened up their handling, but most of all, since the last match that we saw against Queensland, they've tightened up the defence. And let's face it, I think it's because of Broadhurst, Mark Graham, and probably Fred Arcoy and Olsen Filipino out there, and now stealing the ball nicely and looking really good and professional, these New Zealanders. A different side altogether from last week.
Well, Mr. Lindop being very severe on the Australians. It's just cost them 2 points for being offside that time, for treading on the hand of a New Zealand opponent. And I think it's quite obvious, Mick, at this early stage of the game, that Fred Lindop is not going to tolerate it one bit.
Well, of course, it looked as though it could develop early on there, as we saw. The viewers at home could see a little bit of nonsense with Boyd getting into it. He's jumped right on it and now has control of the game. Let's hope he puts the whistle away for a while, though.
So New Zealand with the ball, leading by 4 to 2. A solid defence by Vaughton over the top. And that was his Manly teammate, Mark Broadhurst. Tamati, Arcoy, switch of play. We notice that Arcoy's left ankle is now strapped. And another very, very good run by the New Zealand captain, Graham.
And that switch of play bringing the Australians undone. They're not going up in the middle of the ruck, and the New Zealanders are finding it a little bit soft in the middle there.
Well, they're leading by 4 points to 2. Tamati to West, running on the ball with more determination tonight. Got the pass away. Smith tried to work his way through. It was well taken in the tackle by Morris. Tamati. Broadhurst out to Luluai. Tried to step around Rogers. And again, Paul Vaughton doing more than his share of defensive work in his first test match.
He's certainly not wrong. He's everywhere, and his cover defence is coming right across as it should.
So Lindop talking to both sets of forwards. Steve Mortimer in his third test match for Australia to feed the ball into the scrum. And again a penalty. Well, this is something that Steve Rogers did get into trouble for in the State of Origin matches.
Mortimer.
Steve Mortimer, I should say, during the State of Origin matches. And again, Fred Lindop right on the spot there to chastise a little Australian halfback.
And he is doing that. This is what we saw him do in that game in Sydney. But let's hope he wakes up to himself.
Broadhurst charging upfield for New Zealand. The ball's gone loose. Picked up by Gall. And again, some good defence by Rowan Hancock. Tamati takes it up. Comes straight to Morris. And again, the little red-headed lock forward, Paul Vaughton in there to effect the tackle. Broadhurst through the dummy. And you'll see the man coming off the bottom of that again, Paul Vaughton. My word, he's done some great defensive work for Australia in the opening 22 minutes of this first half. Switch of play by Arcoy. And again, Vaughton effecting the tackle. 3 tackles in a row by the Australian lock forward. Broadhurst. Quick hands by Smith. That's Arcoy with a little chip. It's a good one. Oh, Brentnall's been felled. And the penalty. I think it's the lock forward, Mark Graham. Les Boyd coming up to have a few words to say to the North Sydney lock forward. Let's watch it. There's the chip by Arcoy. Graham was impeded. Brentnall came through. Yes, thanks for coming. And the penalty quite justifiably to Australia.
But it should have been earlier to New Zealand because he was impeded, the lock forward, Mark Graham, and I think that sort of upset him a little bit. Looks like a hot potato in front of that Australian player. I think it was Mick Cronin looking at it.
So Greg Brentnall very slowly to his feet. And he looks a bit groggy as he gets back, but he'll be the man that will look for touch on that far side. So 25.5 minutes gone in the first half. New Zealand lead the test match by 4 to 2. With 8 test matches between the two countries in Brisbane since 1948. New Zealand have won on only 2 occasions, in 1952 and in 1963.
Well, actually, it was nearly a comedy of errors there, but the touch judge has his flag up. But it was very well done by Tamati, I think it was. Howie Tamati over there on the touchline to push the ball back in, but unfortunately his foot must have been out.
So the referee getting the correct interpretation. They've given the ball back to Australia for the 6 tackles. Tapped by Krilich. Rowan Hancock. Well, that shows the toughness of Rowan Hancock. He was felled in the opening minutes, but there's not too many come as tough as Rowan Hancock, Mick.
No, he is tough and just plays it as honestly as he can. He never ceases to amaze me because, let's face it, probably his condition has improved, but it couldn't be anywhere up to the standard of the guys he's playing with.
Of course, Rowan Hancock playing in Toowoomba.
Or some great defence there from Olsen Filipina, putting Mick Cronin on the turf.
Well, that's the first time John Rebo's touched the ball in this match. And he's got a nice welcome by the New Zealanders. Krilich into dummy half again. And this time the referee spots the New Zealanders offside. Well, you certainly can't criticise him, Mick, because he is right.
Yes, it was the front rower, Tamati, going up there, creeping up. He's a big fellow. He's wanting to get up and smother the Australian attack. And let's face it, New Zealand so far have done that. 4-2, no tries scored, so it's a feather in their cap, really.
So the kick by Brentnell takes play up to within about 8 metres of the New Zealand quarter line. And as Mick mentioned, no tries scored in the test match so far. 2 penalty goals to New Zealand, 1 to Australia. Rowan Hancock trying to split them down this blind side. Paul Vaughton, the man that goes to dummy half. Mortimer, Lewis, Rogers, Cronin. One-handed pass, beautifully unloaded. Rogers, good defence that time by Lulawai. Good backing up by Craig Young. But this New Zealand defence has looked pretty solid. Lewis, the long pass to Brentnell. That's a bad pass. Vaughton in trouble. And he's regained it. Plays the ball to Cronin. Brentnell on the blind side. Wrapped up right on the halfway line.
And in 2 passing movements, Australia's lost 38 to 40 metres, and that is not good attack.
Krilich trying to take up play for Australia. Rebo, starved of work in the first half, comes into dummy half. Mortimer, out to Lewis. Cronin. Boyd, support outside of Boosted, but good defence again by the big centre 3-quarter, Olsen Filipina. And that's tackle number 6 on Australia. Well, no doubting the determination of the New Zealand side. I wonder what the magic Cess Mountford tonic was after their last appearance here last weekend, Mick.
Well, actually, he must have, he wouldn't have had to say too much because I think they knew. There's this score, 4-2 so far, leading New Zealanders, and I think Cess Mountford wouldn't have to say anything. I think they had a terrible game, they knew it, and that was the answer to that.
Well, another scrum penalty against Australia. The referee has been very severe on Steve Mortimer and also on Max Krilich. There's only been 1 decided scrum, and that was won by New Zealand. And I'd say most of the penalty count, 12 to New Zealand and 9 to Australia, have been scrum penalties, Mick.
Yes, and all basically half of them at least or more coming from scrums. Something going on in those scrums that Mr. Lindop's not happy about at all.
New Zealand with the ball. 5 metres out from the quarter line on the attack. Broadhurst bumped off 1, couldn't bump off the second. That was Wally Lewis driving the big prop forward back. Smith, Arcoy, West stood in the tackle, got it back in field, and Gall was the man beautifully tackled by Vaughton.
And I noticed Gall doesn't pass the ball much. He didn't have to down the coast, and he didn't have the chance the other night. A great run by Mark Broadhurst, but he's not unloading the ball, and there was a gap on if he'd unloaded that.
Well, another penalty against Australia, and Rod Morris was the man penalised. Well, it's got to be at least once a game we've seen him get penalised for that too, Mick, lying all over the opponent.
True, and well, I suppose if he can get away with it well enough, but really it's not needed. Let's face it, here it is now, bumping run by Broadhurst, and then there's Rod, comes in and sort of leans on him and rolls him around a bit and pushes on him. and then pushes him again and says, oh, I'll pull him down, and then throws his arms in the air and says, it wasn't my fault.
So a chance for New Zealand to go even further ahead. Gordon Smith has been on target with his 2 attempts so far. 30 minutes gone in the first half. A chance for New Zealand to go even further ahead. There's the kick. That's straight. New Zealand lead the test match by 6-2 here at Lang Park. There's still more action to come from the Brisbane League headquarters after this commercial break. Well, the Australians, Mick, have paid the penalty for throwing away foolish infringements and penalties within kicking distance, and it's bounced New Zealand to a very handy lead.
And actually in a test match, the way they're playing, that could be a handy lead at the end of 79, 80 minutes. As I said, their attack is quite good and lots better than we saw, but their defence has amazed me. They haven't let this Australian team, and let's face it, they're among the best in the world, this Australian side, best players actually. They haven't gone anywhere, have they?
They certainly haven't made an effective break as yet. Arcoy, Smith, Tamati, a beautiful pass for Lulawai. O'Hara on the left wing for New Zealand, and Boyd was the man that came over the top with Hancock. Tamati, Smith, Arcoy, Broadhurst, one-handed pass away to Filipina. Look at the strength of the big Maori centre. He just bumped Hancock off and says, stop me if you can.
Oh dear me, that was a powerhouse run. He didn't end up going anywhere, but I tell you what, he let a few Australians know he's out there.
Well, Rowan Hancock has come off second best on 2 occasions tonight. And again, we see that New Zealand, unlike what they did last weekend at Lang Park, are holding onto the ball for the 6 tackles.
Yes, it's quite a novelty to see them do that, and very refreshing to see, I might add.
Well, it certainly set this first test match alight. Who would have expected that scoreline of 6-2 in favour of New Zealand? As we're about 8 minutes short of half-time. Graham stood off the pack for New Zealand. He's shown great strength tonight to stand in tackles. Wally Lewis, the man on the ground for Australia. Tamati, a dummy half. Arcoy slipped the little pass to Gall, and he went to ground on the tackle. Standing flat-footed was Broadhurst. Got the pass away.
Actually, he was having a bit of a spell back there, and no one called for it on the open.
Great cover defending tackle by Wally Lewis on the big second row forward west.
The tempo of the New Zealand attack slowing down a little.
Graham. Beautiful pass. Oh, top defence. It could be a try, but the referee has ruled it's gone forward. But that was a top tackle by Bretnell. In fact, the penalty, the player was ruled, in fact, offside. And that could be interesting to have a look at it again, because I really didn't see the pass get unloaded, Mick.
Neither did I, and actually, there's a player in back play down, the Australian. Steve Mortimer is down. No one's seen it as yet, and he hasn't moved. He's breathing. He's going up and down, so he's okay. Not struggling for breath. But that looked good. That was good attack from the New Zealanders, and they just couldn't carry it on. And I felt West, once again, with his slowness of unloading the ball, foiled the try. I felt if he'd unloaded quicker, it was on for sure.
Well, Steve Mortimer doesn't look all that well at all. And he's struggling. I think he's could well be knocked right out, Mick. They seem to be a little bit concerned about him. That's the captain, Max Krilich.
Actually, he's not feeling the best. You can tell by the look of him and the eyes. Pulling at the socks.
35 minutes of play gone in this first half, and New Zealand leading by 6 points to 2. And with all sorts of problems there with Steve Mortimer. He shakes his head to his captain. Obviously, the old question was asked, Mick, where are you, Steve? If he enters Lang Park, he's okay.
You see. And by the look of it, he's flummed saying Lang Park, because he's not feeling well at all. Let's face it, I'd rather be here than him standing down there. Oh, he's not good at all. He's trying to run back to his teammates, but it's just not on.
Well, that could cause some problems for the Australians if he is forced to leave the field, because the replacement...
Well, trainer Richards is taking him off. Whether they're going to replace him or not, I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see who they do replace him with, because we know who the replacement players are, Muggleton and Meninga, but how this back line would be reformed would be quite interesting. So Australia with the restart. Rowan Hancock and Stevie Mortimer not very, very well at all. Morris, Krilich, Les Boyd, right on the halfway line, he's wrapped up. So about 5 minutes remaining in this first half. New Zealand with a very handy lead. Boyd can't break this very determined defence. Steve Mortimer looks as though he's got a bit more life back at him now. Vaughton, Lewis, Bretnell, beautiful tackle by Arcoy.
By Jove, they're hitting hard, the New Zealanders. And Steve Mortimer isn't the only one that's feeling it.
Back goes O'Hara. Now Kemble, he's had limited opportunities. And that's a great run by the New Zealand fullback. Well, a very rubber-legged Steve Mortimer is being led around towards the goal line at the Coca-Cola end of Lang Park. And I'd say by that, there's every possibility that he may not be coming back on the field. Although, Mick, a decision could be made at half-time if Australia gamble on playing with 12 men up until half-time.
Well, that'd be the way New Zealand are playing. Here's another penalty and New Zealand kicking for touch. But the way New Zealand are playing, there's a replay. Didn't see much of it, but I wouldn't like to see Australia trying to hold New Zealand with 12 men, not till half-time.
Well, that's a decision, of course, of the coach, Frank Stanton.
Basically, though, there's only 3 minutes to go, so possibly they could do that.
Vaughton over the top right on the halfway line. Tamati, the man going into dummy half. Broadhurst charging upfield, bumps off Morris, got the pass away to Smith, and he takes play up over the halfway, still going. And finally the cover defence was there of Craig Young. But I've been very, very impressed by the New Zealanders. There's Tamati on the boil, and watch for the man that'll come up with the cover defending tackle. Again it was Craig Young. Steve Mortimer coming back onto the field for Australia, and that's met with a great deal of approval by this Lang Park crowd. Although Steve Mortimer wasn't the most popular man when playing for New South Wales against Queensland during some of those torrid State of Origin matches. So some determined defence again by Les Boyd on tackle number 6, and Rowan Hancock was also in there as well. So Mortimer to feed the scrum for Australia.
Well, the feature of the match has been the rugged defence by New Zealand. They've come out and put Australia right on their tails and have done it for, well, 38 minutes.
Mortimer seems to have recovered pretty well. Bowstead got it away to Vaughton, and he's wrapped up in the middle of the pitch midway between the half and the quarter line. Up goes Craig Young. Over the top went West. Krilich, Mortimer, Cronin, Bretnell, and again some great defence by Filipina. Their defence has been absolutely first class in this first half. But this time they've been caught offside. The man that was pinged was Luluai.
And I don't agree, because the Australians were, 30 metres back. The Kiwis were standing, at least 12 to 14 metres, and he still pinched them for being offside. I feel that's a little unfair.
So Bretnell will look for touch on the commentary side of Lang Park. So possibly the last chance of Australia to launch an effective attack on this New Zealand defence that hasn't cracked so far in the first half. Mortimer, Boyd, and there's that great defence again of Mark Graham. Well, what's that signal by the referee Lindop? Well, he's allowed play to go on. On the knock on by Wally Lewis.
I know what Fred Lindop stopped play for. He thought Boyd, the way he went backwards over his legs, he was severely injured. He may have cracked a leg or done something. That's why when Boyd fell very awkwardly and went back over.
So less than a minute of play remaining in the first half. New Zealand leading by 6 points to 2. Through 3 goals by the number 7 there, Gordon Smith, but now the penalty goes against New Zealand. And no doubt Bretton will try and drive play deep in towards that New Zealand quarter line. No, the tap taken by Mortimer. Lewis still going. Krilich. He can't beat that very strong first line of defence of New Zealand. Morris. 12 metres out from the New Zealand line. Can Australia register a try before half-time? Mortimer with the bomb, putting pressure on Kemble. Brentnell goes up and took it, but offside.
And the crowd not agreeing. And actually, it's a rehearsed move that the New South Welshmen have put on against Queensland. They're doing the same against New Zealand. Mortimer goes the open side and kicks it back to the blind. And on that occasion, I felt probably Brentnell was onside. Most of them are behind him. Yes, definitely behind. Here he comes up to take the mark and goes up beautifully. But that's the end of the first half.
Yes, and New Zealand go to Lemons, leading by 6 points to 2 in a very, very impressive return to form. We'll be back at Lang Park for the second half in just a moment. We welcome back our country stations throughout Queensland, SEQ8 Maryborough, RTQ7 in Rockhampton, MVQ6 Mackay, our friends at Townsville, Mount Isa and Toowoomba as well, with news that New Zealand are leading by 6 points to 2 at half-time. The scrums favoured New Zealand 2-0 in the first half. The penalties favoured New Zealand by 15 to 12. And certainly I think we're in for the opening 10 minutes of the second half, Mick, where both sides will be out to try and break that defence that has stood so strong in the first half.
Well, I'm certain that Frank Stanton would have said to his team, when you get the ball, utilise it more. You're not doing enough, although I must admit it's very hard when you don't win one scrum in the first half, because basically that's what's happened. But New Zealand won one scrum and seemed to have the ball, most of the 40 minutes and utilised it well. So I'd say there's a few words being spoken in there, and you'll see Australia throw it around. They have to, or they won't win this game.
Well, the two injured players in the first half have taken their position back in their respective sides, Steve Mortimer and also Fred Arcoy. That's Arcoy with that left ankle very heavily strapped, affecting the tackle on Steve Rogers. So the scrum to go down midway between the half and the quarter line at Australia's end of the ground. And Steve Mortimer appears to have made a remarkable recovery after being felled about 4 or 5 minutes before half-time. There's the scrum feed, and again the penalty. Well, it's about time that Steve Rogers woke up that these referees are not going to tolerate the incorrect feeds. And Smith again trying to catch Australia inside that 10 metres.
Actually, he did, but Mr. Lindop didn't blow the whistle.
Well, I think I mentioned Steve Rogers here a minute ago. Of course, I was referring to Steve Mortimer, the young halfback in this Australian side. But he took a very, very heavy knock in the opening half, just before half-time.
Yes, the iris of his eyes was quite dilated as we took the close-ups, and he wasn't looking well at all. And as you said, David, he's made a marvellous recovery.
And Kemble again injecting himself into the line for New Zealand. That's Tamati. He made about 4 or 5 metres, was claimed over the top by Craig Young and also by Rowan Hancock. They come towards this side again through Smith, searching for the opening. Couldn't beat the tackle of Wally Lewis.
Searching for a bit of support on that occasion too on the inside, and nothing forthcoming.
So another scrum to go down. I wonder what Steve Mortimer's tactics are going to be on this occasion.
Be quite simple, I think. Throw it in the middle for a change.
It's pretty difficult there. There's not a very good tunnel. Well, he threw it in the middle and they've lost the scrum. Smith to his feet. Gall charging upfield. Boyd gave him a little chop too as he went to ground. Tamati, Arcoy, that's Broadhurst. And there's his two Manly teammates putting him on the ground. On the blind side, Tamati. Gall. And Australia penalised again. Now a chance for Smith to add more points for New Zealand. Mark Graham there, the New Zealand captain, speaking with the hooker Tamati. No doubt Mark Graham has been very impressed with the way that his other 12 members of this New Zealand side have performed in the game so far.
Well, earlier I mentioned West, the big second rower, number 10 for New Zealand. He had one good game against the Gold Coast and from then fell in a heap. Well, he's having another good one tonight, or doing his job, which he didn't do, I felt, last week. Tamati, the big fellow, Kevin Tamati, the front row, well, he's played well every time we've seen him play, and he's putting in another blinder tonight for him. But they're all playing well, as you said, and most impressive all round. I tell you what, the little kicker, Gordon Smith, have you seen his face, a close-up of his face? It looks as though he's been run over by a bus. I think he's been hit by a few cover defending second rowers in his time.
Well, he's on target again. That makes it 4 out of 4. And New Zealand lead by 8 points to 2. And who would believe that scoreline? With about 5 minutes gone in the second half. Well, Mick Cronin to restart again. And Australia certainly with a few problems now, Mick.
Yes, they certainly have got problems. New Zealand not looking like cracking at all with their defence. And actually, it's a long time since I've seen the top Australian side contained by such very good defence. And these guys were poor last week and they're professional this week. I can't quite understand it.
So play just outside the quarter line as Tamati takes play up. That time Boyd in there for the tackle. Tamati, Broadhurst. 8 points to 2 in favour of New Zealand. Good defence that time by Hancock. Tamati beat Morris's tackle but couldn't beat Craig Young. And again New Zealand go to ground with the ball on the 6th tackle. The scrums favouring New Zealand 3-0. The penalty 17-12 in favour of New Zealand. Mr. Lindop is very, very severe on the Australians with the scrum feed. This time it's Gordon Smith to feed for New Zealand. And this time the penalty goes against Gordon Smith. Well, I don't think the Lang Park crowd are warming to Mr. Lindop.
Well, I'm certainly not. In the total game so far, we've had 3 scrums that have eventuated. I quite frankly don't know how many we've put down, but 3, it's getting a bit beyond a joke.
Well, if both halfbacks are doing it on their feet, I'd just let them keep going, Mick, because it's certainly slowed the tempo of the game down. And again, there's Cronin standing, as he's so accustomed to doing. Now, Kerry Bowstead. Great run by Bowstead. And for the first time, New Zealand's defence looked like cracking. Wally Lewis is down injured in back play. There he is there in picture. Now Rogers, Cronin, here's danger. Boyd. Got the pass away. Vaughton. But the ball's gone astray, and I think New Zealand have come up with it. Now a penalty to Australia.
Ball going to him in an offside position, the New Zealander. But by Jove, Australia looking good. And Boyd out wide, cracking him. There's Wally Lewis, getting a little bit of attention from the Australian trainer. But that's as ominous as Australia has looked in this entire match.
Well, we made the comment at half-time, Mick. Whatever side scored the first try could easily take this test match, and Australia looked on the boil right on that occasion.
Yes, they looked really good indeed.
So Mick Cronin has kicked 1 from 2. The only points for Australia in this test match. Max Krilich checking on the fitness there of Wally Lewis. The Australian vice-captain seems to have copped a whack across the nose. Now Cronin with the ball placed. It's on the quarter line, 5 metres in from the far touchline.
That old saying, he doesn't run on his nose anyhow, and Wally looks all right now. Sweet as enough.
So Cronin moves in. There's the kick. It's nowhere near being good enough. Bowstead knocked it on. Well, Mick, I just wonder whether or not that could have been a rehearsed move, because Kerry Bowstead certainly read it well and very nearly took the ball from the kick.
Well, you could be right. I wouldn't like to say, because I don't think I've ever seen Mick Cronin kick one as badly as that. Oh yes, one in Sydney, but that's only 2 in his lifetime that I've watched him, and I'm a fan of his.
So New Zealand with the ball. Cronin has now kicked 1 from 3. Smith wrapped up in the tackle.
Coy seems to be just a passenger there, walking around with his foot bandage.
Well, the replacement on the bench for New Zealand as far as the back line is concerned is John Whittaker, a veteran of 23 test matches for New Zealand, but he was made look rather ordinary here last weekend by Mal Meninga. So New Zealand with the ball now just outside their own quarter line. They're still leading by 8 points to 2. Solid defence by Rod Morris. And again, Rowan Hancock coming into effect the tackle as well. Well, for the sake of the game, we hope that Mr. Lindop lets this scrum go, because I'm sure that this Lang Park crowd is getting a little bit fed up with the continued stoppages and penalties.
I suppose we really can't blame him. We should blame the players, but he should have respect by now and be making them do what he wants them to do.
Well, another scrum penalty even before the ball went in. And the look of frustration of Max Krilich. But the penalty goes to Australia. Well, Max got the penalty then, Mick, but I think he would have rather won a scrum for a change.
Certainly would. Well, actually, he hasn't got one up against his name yet in the, what's that, 45, 50 minutes.
Brentnell tried to unload the pass. John Rebo comes in now to dummy half for Australia. They're only about 10 metres out from the New Zealand line. Rebo trying to use his strength, but driven back by that New Zealand defence. Pressure now on the New Zealand line. Rod Morris. He came on as a replacement in the Lang Park test in 78 for the injured Ray Price. Mortimer, rehearsed move for Boyd. So close to that New Zealand try line. In fact, that's how far he is out. Mortimer, a dummy half. Wally Lewis beat Arcoy's tackle. Stood in the tackle, finally put to ground. There's the General Mortimer. Pass look forward, and a good decision by the referee. A penalty to New Zealand. The pass definitely forward to Greg Brentnell.
Yes, but it was Mortimer. Here he is in the instant replay. He holds onto it. Yes, definitely forward, even from this angle. And Brentnell over. A nice rehearsed move, going astray for Australia. But quite frankly, I thought they could have been penalised earlier because Wally Lewis went around an Australian and used him as a shepherd. Mr. Lindop didn't see that one.
So the New Zealanders breathe a sigh of relief with that penalty. And most surprised, Mick, that they didn't look for touch.
Yes, I am too. Gain as much ground as you can and get out of your own quarter. That's the name of rugby league today.
Well, a mistake here gives Australia the ball back inside the New Zealand quarter. That's exactly where they don't want to be, leading by 8 points to 2. Well, they've immediately moved out of it because Lindop has caught Australia offside again. There's the scoreline, 8-2 in favour of New Zealand.
12 minutes of viewing, I wouldn't say playing at this stage, eh?
The game just hasn't flowed as a spectacle. Mick mentioned that you can blame the players for continued infringements, but I think Mr. Lindop is trying to adopt an old Eric Clay. What do they call him in England? The Sergeant Major, Mick, from the early 60s.
I suppose this chap would have been under him or seen him referee.
Lindop is out here for the 2 test matches. The next one on the 17th of July in Sydney. Here's the break by Campbell. Support of Smith. Campbell again. He's lost it. New Zealand still maintain possession, but the referee has ruled the knock-on.
Oh, and a nice break there by New Zealand, and they look very dangerous. And Gordon Smith backed up Campbell beautifully there. The inside pass back in over the top wasn't, well, didn't get back to the man, unfortunately, but it looked real good. And that's New Zealand looking at their best.
Well, there have been 37 stoppages in this match. The injured player is Max Krilich. And I'm sure, even despite the outcome of this match at the end of the 80 minutes, Mick, that this Australian side are going to know they've played 80 minutes of football against New Zealand.
Well, I've always said that the New Zealanders, even though you may beat them, but they certainly let you know you've been out there. Earlier on, well, not so much in this program, in an earlier program this afternoon, David, here it is. Nice break by Campbell. Split the Australians. And watch for Gordon Smith. He comes up. Here he is on the outside now. There he is. And this inside pass over the top. Well, it got to Campbell. He should have taken that one. And I felt the try was on because the wing support.
Well, another penalty to New Zealand. And a little bit of a fracas has broken out there between the 2 packs of forwards. But it won't negate the penalty. Filipina again to look for touch on the far side.
And just to finish what I'd started saying, talking about they're used to playing in the mud. Well, Carlisle Park, it's a smelly old hole. These guys are performing quite well here.
There's Tamati. And now Australia called to defend, trailing by 8-2. West. There's Graham. Oh, there's a little kick between the two hookers. Tamati. Arkoi. Great defence by Wally Lewis. Now New Zealand go on the blind. Switch of play. There's Broadhurst. Tackle well by Paul Vaughton. Paul Vaughton has shown no first test match nerves out there tonight. His defence has been absolutely first class. Now Graham. And that's tackle number 6, but Australia forced to defend to all their limits of that onslaught by New Zealand. So a scrum feed again by Australian halfback Steve Mortimer. Krilic not being able to get down. Mr. Lindop telling Mortimer to wait. There's the ball in the scrum. And a scrum win to New Zealand. So pressure now on the Australians. They trail 8-2. Filipina, head down. And well tackled by Rod Morris. Tamati. Broadhurst. Hancock smothering him in the tackle. Tamati. Got the pass away. Broadhurst, in fact, it was West that dived on it. The referee keeping a good check on that Australian line of defence. Smith, Gall, beautifully tackled by Wally Lewis and Vaughton. The ball loose again, and 6 more to New Zealand.
That puts pressure on Australia. They will have to defend now.
Graham beat one tackle. Stood, tried to unload it to O'Hara. Tamati, Arkoi, Filipina. Stepped beautifully for a big man, but upended. Great tackle by Rowan Hancock. Broadhurst, the Australians well offside. They can't afford to throw away another penalty here. Arkoi, there's the kick, not a good one. Taken by West, regained by Lewis. Well, I think you're right about Arkoi. He really is a passenger out there at the moment, Mick. When he had to put his left foot on the ground to kick, then he lost all power whatsoever. Bowstead. He scored 2 tries in his debut match against New Zealand here in 1978. Mortimer. Cronin.
Knocking the ball on, trying to get it ready to unload. And Australia looking a little better in their attack, moving the ball out. But I felt New Zealand at fault when they were doing the attacking in the Australians' quarter. They should have run the ball and moved it wide, because they were causing lots of trouble to the Australian defence. And look at this New Zealand backline standing up on screen. You can see the white line, and in relation to that white line, I'd say they're very close to being offside.
Well, Krilic still having trouble getting down into that scrum. Oh, again, the penalty by Steve Mortimer, and this time he's being called out by Lindop. He's told him that's a warning. Next time he's off for 5 minutes.
And he's arguing, and if he keeps arguing, and he will be going earlier for the 5 minutes. The crowd hooting and hollering, but Mr. Lindop knows what he wants.
There's the kick for touch. Malmeninga. No, it's Muggleton, looks like, coming on the field for Australia.
In the second row, Hancock off.
So Rowan Hancock going off. John Muggleton. A test debut for John Muggleton tonight. Former Australian schoolboy John Muggleton. Formerly played in the centres. Made his mark with Parramatta in the second row. So the first change to the team lineups. Filipina, he's been a constant threat to the Australian defence tonight.
Fred Arkoi just waltzing around the back there. He's trying to stay on the field. And New Zealand being pinged for being inside the 10 metres. And dear me, this is really ruining the game. On that occasion, they were going back. The ball hadn't been played, and he's blown the whistle.
So the kick again by Bretnell. Takes play to within about 8 metres of the halfway line. Still no tries in this match. Wally Lewis, nose bleeding in the Australian camp. Rod Morris, wrapped up by Broadhurst right on the halfway line. Krilich, Young. First touch for Muggleton. Scrums 4-0 in favour of New Zealand, 21-16 in favour of New Zealand as well. Mortimer saw the gap, but it closed very quickly through West and also through Tamati.
Tamati giving him a bit of a massage on the ground, and before he even hit the ground then, and getting away with it.
Lewis. Claimed by Filipina and thrown to the ground near that far touchline. Well, New Zealand caught offside again. Well, Mick, these players are supposed to be professional footballers. We've been criticising the referee, Mr. Lindop, but if we look at it, they have been, in fact, infringing.
Well, on that occasion, they certainly were, and he can... Well, actually, he could let it go, but then the game would become a schmozzle, as we saw in Sydney, with the offside play by both sides. Well, they're not getting away with it tonight, and I must admit the constant blowing of the whistle is not endearing Mr. Lindop to me, but he's trying to play the rules as best he can, and the players constantly infringing isn't making anything easy. I know you viewers at home aren't, well, relishing the stoppages, but I'm not either.
So Mick Cronin with the attempt of a penalty goal. From about 12 metres inside New Zealand's end of the ground. Has the ball placed. There's the kick. Great kick. 8-4 the scoreline. Australia pull 2 points back. We'll be back at Lang Park in a few moments' time. Start of play by Alson Filipina of New Zealand. Vaughton. Solid defence again by New Zealand. Well, Mick, we've got about 18 minutes of play remaining in this match. And it certainly has been a torrid encounter out there.
Well, the defence has been bone-crushing, to say the least. And we see Australia endeavouring to move the ball, but New Zealand having none of it. And Western Company, the New Zealand back rowers, really getting into it. And solid defences. Cronin splits them.
Rogers. Beautiful tackle by Kemble. That was a try-saving tackle by the New Zealand fullback. Mortimer. He slips. Krilich. Boyd. Bretnell. Rebo. And good cover again by Graham. Penalty to Australia against Mark Graham for a little short uppercut on John Rebo. But Mick, going back to that break by Mick Cronin, I just wondered, we'll have a look at this incident with Graham. That's the one that he got penalised for, and for the second as well. But I just wonder, at that pass that Cronin got put in the clear, it looked a little bit suspect. But when he did break, he certainly looked the Mick Cronin of old.
Yes, well, let's face it, the man with the ball there, Mick Cronin, he hasn't had his chances tonight, neither has Rogers. Not any of the players, because of this fine defence from New Zealand that we've been talking about. And it's quite amazing to me that a team like New Zealand can play so badly in defence and general play one week, come back the following week to play for their country against Australia and tighten up, well, so hard. I think if you got on the game early, you would have seen the tackle or body bump on Rowan Hancock. Well, that's been the trend all night. It's been really solid stuff, and it's just unfortunate that these constant infringements have made Mr. Lindop blow the whistle and stop play. Great kick.
Another great kick by Mick Cronin. So Mr. Reliable brings the score back to 8 points to 6. And now New Zealand with the pressure on them, leading by just the 2 points. Well, Mick, I don't know whether you agree with this, but I think this is the time that Frank Stanton could inject Mal Meninga into the game.
Yes, I suppose you could bring the young fella on, because last week he tore the New Zealanders apart, and with Arcoy limping around there on the inside, he could do just that. But who would you put away? Steve Rogers?
Well, he would be the man that I would replace at this stage, purely for the psychological advantage, because they would know what Mal Meninga did to them last week, and it could be a good tactical ploy by the coach, Frank Stanton. Wally Lewis. Good defence again by Kemble. Australia on the attack. Borton wrapped up by West. Although the pressure seems to be getting a little bit towards to New Zealand, the gaps have started to open. Morris. Cronin. Brentnell. The pass has gone astray, picked up by O'Hara.
Misunderstanding with the two players out there. Brentnell went to pass outside to Steve Rogers, and he'd long gone inside. That was Brentnell's fault, not Rogers.
On the blind side goes Tamati.
I might add that that saved New Zealand from embarrassment. Australia just starting to move, and move nicely.
Now Broadhurst. Pumped off Boyd. Still going, Mark Broadhurst. New Zealand still in possession, 10 metres short of halfway. Well, I think the crowd may have heard me, because there's the Brisbane chant of "We want Mal." And you can imagine the reception if Mal Meninga does get his test debut here tonight. So the scrum to pack down.
Well, actually, that mistake by Brentnell, it was Rogers that didn't seem to be in position, and I feel that's brought the wrath of the crowd.
So the scrum to feed. We've got 14.5 minutes remaining in this test match. The ball into the scrum, a New Zealand ball.
And Whittaker is on for Koi at 5'8" at last.
Well, Filipina has gone to 5'8". Whittaker's gone to inside centre, and immediately he's wrapped up by Wally Lewis. So Whittaker, as I mentioned, a veteran of 23 test matches for New Zealand. He made his debut in the 1970 World Cup. There's Rod Morris, the Australian prop forward. And a penalty. Australia caught offside again. And a chance for Smith to put New Zealand even further ahead. So decision time now for Mark Graham.
I think he'd be going for the touch, and he is. It's a little bit far for Smith by the look of his kicks, but then again he was only touching them close. Maybe he can kick the long ones, but they're not taking any chances.
Well, Graham electing to put pressure on Australia again. Still no tries in the test match. We've got 13.5 minutes of play remaining, and it's been a very torrid encounter out there. West plays the ball. Australia can't afford to throw away another penalty, but they're going very close to infringing.
Yes, they're very close to being offside.
Particularly the winger Kerry Bowstead. Broadhurst with the wrap around. There's the ball lost. Australia breathe a sigh of relief.
Howie Tamati dropping it and not doing New Zealand any good.
Wally Lewis claimed by Broadhurst over the top. Underneath was Mark Graham. Morris. Craig Young. Dummy half is Krilich. Runs himself. Oh, and just wrestled to the ground again by Olsen Filipina. Vaughton. A very impressive test debut in defence for Paul Vaughton. Rogers. Brentnell. And again some good defence. The pass unloaded. Cronin. Wrapped up by Prom. And put to ground on that far touchline. Rebo, a dummy half. Mortimer. Lewis with the kick. Kemble has the support now of O'Hara. Drew the defence. And Dane O'Hara caught in a good tackle by Muggleton. Whittaker. O'Hara. Play 5 metres short of the halfway line. New Zealand in the lead and in possession of the ball. They lead by 8 points to 6 in a game that has yet to produce a try. And we've had just something short of 70 minutes. So the scrum packing down. Gordon Smith tonight playing in his 10th test match for New Zealand. Penalty to New Zealand. We'll take a break and watch the outcome. No, we won't. They've taken the tap. And good tactics again.
Gordon Smith, top. Well, he's had a top game, the little halfback. let's face it, if Mark Graham was leading the forwards, this chap's really been organising that back line.
So Olsen Filipina drives the ball into touch. Penalties favouring New Zealand, 23-18. The scrum's 5-0. So Australia's captain Max Krilich yet to win a scrum for the green and gold. New Zealand will be intent on playing percentage football at the moment to try and use up the 6 tackles and try and work their way down into that Australian quarter line. Broadhurst with the switch of play to Graham. There's the gap. Graham's through. Goal. Tackled by Mortimer and he's lost it. Australia in possession of the ball. Craig Young. Wally Lewis. Oh, a bad pass. That could have been dangerous and costly. Krilich to his feet. Kerry Boosted. Just short of the quarter line. Krilich again for Mortimer. Then out to Wally Lewis. In fact, cut Wally Lewis out for Buggleton. Oh, and a bad mistake again by Australia. Frustration at this great New Zealand defence. Craig Young. Bretnell well tackled by O'Hara. Mick, this defence of New Zealand has been absolutely first class.
Oh, it's top stuff because they're holding back the best team in the world, and they're doing it standing on the air at present.
Mortimer wrapped up before he could get the pass away on tackle number 6.
You see that frustration you were speaking about, those short one-arm passes, Australia trying to open it up, and that determined New Zealand defence just smothering them all the time.
So the scrum packing down. Lindop trying to clear the tunnel. Oh, Steve Mortimer. That went right in behind the back of the Australian front row. This time he wasn't penalised, and he's having all sorts of trouble
with the back line as well. Look at them. They're standing up on each other in that back line.
And Max Krilich has won his first scrum. And I think the crowd let him know it too, Mick.
Yes. Old Dowling, of course, sitting down there, New South Wales. He'd be smiling quietly. I know he'd like to see Australia do well, but it makes his chances, well, illuminate for the Kangaroo Tour.
So Australia in possession of the ball with 8 minutes of play remaining. They're in all sorts of trouble. They were the odds-on favourites to win this first test match here at Lang Park. Rebo. Great determination by Rebo. Rod Morris showed great hands. Well, if New Zealand are successful, it will be only their 3rd success at Lang Park. Com.
Oh, bad mistake by Krilich trying that pass. Should have held on.
Their last appearance here, New Zealand were defeated by a record margin by Australia by 38 points to 7 in 1978. And here we are in 1982 going into the match as underdogs. New Zealand leading by 8 points to 6. Australia must watch this offside play again, because a penalty here would be right in kicking distance of Gordon Smith. West, Broadhurst. Now the last tackle. Will we see Filipina put the ball in the air? Tamati. He takes the tackle, and we'll see the scrum go down.
Well, actually, you can't heap enough accolades on this New Zealand side. They've come back from nothing. I'd say they were 200 to 1 on to win this test, and they're right in it at the end, leading 8-6. What a lot, with 6 minutes and 37 seconds to go.
So the New Zealand back standing right up, and the penalty against New Zealand, against Australia. And Steve Mortimer's been sent off for 5 minutes. Well, he was warned, Mick.
Yes, and he wouldn't be happy. But let's face it, Mr. Lindop warned him. And I'm not down close to that scrum, but there's heaps of problems in there. There must be. Steve Mortimer must know that Max Krilich wants it a certain way, and if it doesn't go in that way, Max can't win it.
Well, there's only 6 minutes remaining in the test match, so it means Australia for 5 of them will play with 12 men, and that could be costly. The scrum's favouring New Zealand 5-1. The penalties 24-18 in favour of New Zealand. Carmody, a crashing run by the big New Zealand prop forward. Carmody, Smith saw the gap, but it closed very quickly through Les Boyd. Pressure on the Australians now. Kevin Carmody couldn't release the pass. Now Howard Carmody goes into dummy half. Graham spotted the gap, but great defence by Mick Cronin. Last tackle, what will New Zealand's tactics be? Kemble with a kick. He's been tackled late. And a penalty. No, the referee pointed to the quarter line. I thought it was a penalty by the signal, Mick.
Actually, it did look that way to me too. And actually, that was a silly thing to do there. New Zealand should have just taken the tackle and continued to put pressure on Australia. But they've given them the ball with 4 minutes to go.
And thrown away a penalty. So from pressuring the Australian line, they will now be back over halfway with this kick by Greg Bretnell. There's the kick by Bretnell. Kemble did his best to touch it before it went out. Oh, and the referee, no, I thought that he had ruled that he had touched it. Play goes on. Morris. Can New Zealand hold on? Vaughton. Pressure time for both teams now, with 4 minutes remaining. But that New Zealand defence that I thought may have cracked as the game went on has been rock solid. The New Zealand back standing well up on the Australians. Cronin, Bretnell, Greg Bretnell to the line. And again the cover was there, another Australian player.
Lewis is down, he was hit very late. Not as bad as it looked, but he thought he'd get a penalty.
So Australia really now playing with 11 men. As Lewis slow to his feet. Rod Morris very close to the New Zealand line. Well, that should be a penalty to Australia. Morris, Young, couldn't get the pass away. Now he gets it to Muggleton. And Muggleton scores in his debut match for Australia. And for the first time in the match, Australia hit the lead.
Well, actually, Mr. Lindop, not penalising Australia for the New Zealanders getting off, had given the Australians the advantage, and they took advantage of it. The crowd's gone wild, and shortly you will see the replay. Here it is. Mr. Lindop didn't penalise the New Zealanders. Let Australia... Here's Muggleton going for the line, and he has to stretch, and he puts it on the white line right down, and that's a try.
And so John Muggleton, the big Parramatta second row forward, came on as a replacement in his first test match. Look at him calling for the ball. He charges through, beats the tackle of Broadhurst, and a great way that he puts the ball down, and he scores in his first test match. So it's taken Australia some 77 minutes to hit the lead. And really, I wonder how New Zealand feel, Mick. They've done their job today. I'm sure that Seth Mountford will be very, very proud of them.
Well, actually, they have performed well, and two that come to mind are Mark Graham, the captain, and Gordon Smith. On that occasion, Mark Graham was trying desperately to give away a penalty. They just wanted the 2 points, nothing else. But Mr. Lindop wouldn't have any part of that. But they've all performed well, that New Zealand side. Really done well indeed.
So Cronin with the ball placed. Only 1 point separates the two teams. There's the kick. Yes! Mick Cronin. Australia 11, New Zealand 8. We'll be back at Lang Park in just a moment. So New Zealand to restart, Mick. It appears that Australia have wrapped the test match up. Let's get some of your final thoughts.
Well, I thought New Zealand have come back, as I said, magnificently. Their defence tremendous all night. I don't think I've seen a team defend so well against Australia for a long, long time. And quite frankly, I'm an Aussie, but I'm sorry to see New Zealand lose this one, because I really felt that they deserved to win it. Let's face it, Max Krilich didn't help. He only won one scrum, although there's only been 6 packed all night. He won the scrums the New Zealand won the scrums 5-1, but the penalties were shocking, and the game really didn't get going. Penalties were 24-18 so far, and the game isn't over. For Australia, well, I reckon it was Cronin, and only Cronin, that put them back into the game. If it wasn't for Mick Cronin's kicking, they'd be still dredging, trying to look for points.
So as the final seconds tick away, we're into the final half minute, and it appears that Australia have wrapped the test match up. The second test match will be in Sydney on July the 17th, but I'm sure that the New Zealanders have shown enough to the Australian sporting public that they'll turn out at the Sydney Cricket Ground for that match in 2 weeks.